Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time, I'm the Main Loop. I do content for Magic the Gathering Puzzle Quest, and this is a video meant to help newer players kind of get into the game and start winning with more consistency, because I'm going to show you a deck that will infinitely loop and win a lot of battles for you. And it's not that hard to build because the main pieces are all uncommons, so it won't take that long to get the pieces compared to other looping decks in the game. So this is a legacy pauper infinite loop for any green planeswalker. So you could even build this for Nissa Sage Animus. I will explain to you how it works, so let's do that now. Step 1, you choose any green planeswalker. Like I said, even starter Nissa. This is a handful of the planeswalkers I feel run it best. But either way, whoever you choose, it will work. Step 2, you build a deck with these cards in it. Harald, King of Skemfar, Migratory Greathorn, and Overgrown Farmland. And I'll show you how those three work together. Step 3, play Harald, King of Skemfar first. It really helps if you also have the Migratory Greathorn in your hand, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Step 4, you cast Migratory Greathorn as a mutation onto Harald, King of Skemfar. If you're newer to the game and you just didn't play during Ikoria's time, I'll explain to you really quickly how mutation works. A card with mutation, it's always going to be a creature actually. A creature with mutation can either be cast as a normal creature or to permanently change another creature in order to gain a new special ability. And each mutation ability of a creature triggers each time that creature is reinforced via casting. So we'll talk about what Harald, King of Skemfar does real quick. When this creature enters the battlefield, fetch the first elf or vanguard card from your library. If that card is a legendary creature or a vanguard with the Tyvar subtype, it gains half its mana. So, a mutated Harald will pull a half-charged Harald and summon a land to the battlefield, filling the other half of the charged Harald in your hand, causing it to happen again when you cast that new Harald, and thus creating an endless loop. So how does that work exactly? So first, the Harald gets cast from your hand. Harald fetches the next Harald in your library and gives it 4 mana. The mutation causes Harald to fetch a mid-vow land to the battlefield. That land gives 5 mana to all cards in your hand, giving the Harald in your hand already enough mana to cast. The newly casted Harald causes step 2 through 4 to happen instantly. So does that make sense to you watching? I hope it does. So consider including these in your deck for objectives. A card that triggers draw or fetch when a creature enters the battlefield, or a creature casted such as Elemental Bond. There are plenty of cards that do this also, but Elemental Bond everybody has, so it's easy to use that. Threats Undetected quickly fetches 2 of the necessary pieces to start the loop, and I should say it gives them mana, so it makes it even easier to start the loop. So this is why I say you want to wait to have Harald and Migratory Greathorn in your hand at the same time, because if you put the Harald down and you don't have a Greathorn in your hand, you set yourself up for not being able to set up the combo because your opponent can easily remove the Harald before you're able to mutate it, so you won't be able to get to the loop. So Threats Undetected makes that a lot less likely to happen. And then a third creature that either provides defense or speeds up the combo setup, such as Crowl Whipcracker. Crowl Whipcracker is really good too, because you can fetch it with Threats Undetected and put it onto the battlefield, and it will destroy an opposing card. So that's a very good one to include. But the beauty of this loop is that you get so many flexible slots for the rest of it. You don't have to dedicate your entire deck to the combo. I would say it's like a 5-card combo to really make it consistent, and the rest of the cards you can use for different purposes. And let's talk about cards you want to avoid including in your deck. Any other elf card, because Harald will fetch that instead and it will break the loop. Any vanguard especially Tyvar Jubilant Brawler, but really any Vanguard, because Harald will also fetch that and it will break the loop, and any other land types, because if you don't fetch the mid-vow lands, then you're not going to be getting the mana into your hand, and that will also break the loop. So we're avoiding things that will break loops by design, include cards that keep the train rolling. So here's a sample deck that I tried to build to make as accessible as possible, because if you have Nissa Sage Animus as your only green planeswalker, you probably don't have a lot of cards to go along with it. So this is kind of like the starter build for this loop. It only needs commons and uncommons. I threw a couple rares in here just because they're really good for it, and Animus Awakening, a lot of people are probably going to have it too, because it's an Origins rare, so it's not that hard to get. Field Trip is an awesome gem conversion spell. Mortality Spear is a card that can destroy most types of cards on your opponent's side. So between this and Whipcracker, you're probably going to keep yourself pretty safe. And then 2 instances of lands in case you're struggling to get the pieces down, just because it makes the deck a little bit more consistent when you're not yet in the loop. So there's that deck. And here is an example of a deck that I actually use in events. A Johnny Sleeper Agent, green-white Planeswalker. I use for Fate is Rarely Fair, the green node, where you're supposed to cast artifact supports and energize, like 5 gems or whatever. So this is an example of tuning my deck for objectives. We can split our deck into cards that make the engine go, and then cards that fulfill objectives for events. So this is a deck that is built to try and get full points and built for consistency, and it has a good amount of defense in it too. So here's an alternate deck for that same node. Similar sort of things going on, but as you can see, flavor-wise, the other cards that are non-loop engine are completely different than what I use with a Johnny Sleeper Agent. And that's not just because I'm using green-blue instead of green-white. There's just so many different ways that you can build around this archetype. Here's a red-green build for Domri Chaosbringer. And the reason Domri is really good for this deck archetype is because Domri has built-in creature fetch in his suite of abilities, so it makes him a good planeswalker because his ability to fetch the pieces without using extra cards. So this is one that I built just, as kind of a training grounds deck that you can just use it to win really quickly, because we added haste into our setup. So as we are building our Harald up to a large amount through all the reinforcements, it can swing for an attack on that turn. So as soon as you get the loop going, if you have Hazard's Favor down, you can win on that same turn, which is really big. And finally, here is one that's a little more on the fun side, green and black. I'm using life gain as a win con in this deck, actually. So you can do a little bit spicier things with this deck archetype. The reason I'm using this Garruk, because his first ability fetches creatures to your hand and gives them mana, making him a consistent planeswalker to run this deck with, because you can just pull out a lot of the pieces you need to get it going. So there are a lot of loops in this game, but why use this one? For me, the most important pieces are all uncommons, making them relatively easy to obtain via crafting and regular booster packs. The main engine is only 3 cards, which frees up space in your deck to tailor it for different needs. You can either use it to win effortlessly or set it up to fulfill objectives. And that's why I'd say card draw and fetch in this deck is really good, because that's what you're going to need to fulfill objectives. If you only play the loop, then the Harald just grows and grows and grows without casting anything else in the deck. So you might lose out on objectives if you play the loop at the wrong time before you're able to fulfill things. So having some defense in your decks is good for stalling before you hit your loop and either win or cast the cards you need to get full points. But beyond that, It is a really simple loop to set up, and it just wins. And if you set it up right, it wins on the turn you start it. So very cool. Okay, so how do you actually acquire the pieces that you need? You need to target these sets here. You would buy call time packs. You can hopefully score one in one premium pack from that set, but if you can't, I would use crafting orbs to try and craft out a bunch of the uncommons from that set. Same with Greathorn, except you would target Ikoria instead, IKO, and there's the symbol for it. And then the cards that are nicknamed the Gain Lands from Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, those are the set symbols that you need to target. And yeah, you would just go either buy a premium pack from each of these sets or spend crafting orbs on them. It's up to you, really. And I should say that Harald and Migratory Greathorn both have full art versions, so you could get lucky and score both of these pieces when they make it into Fibblethip's vault. Problem is that doesn't happen very often. You might be waiting a long time, but just in case they do, make sure to have some crystals ready for that, because that's going to be the easiest way to acquire all the pieces. I will show you some gameplay in case all this hasn't quite clicked in yet, and you can see how it works. All right, so we got Nissa versus Nissa in Platinum Training Grounds. Get a Threats Undetected and a Whip Cracker. So great setup. Really nice to start with the Threats Undetected. This will make it so that we can pull the two creatures that are most important to our loop here. There's also a Harald, so that's cool. Get Elemental Bond. We want that down to so that we can continuously draw as we do our loop. So this will be a pretty good example of how this deck works. We're almost there. Okay. Did not take our Harald out. So here we go. We cast him as a mutation on Harald, and we'll get the loop going here. We summoned a land to the battlefield and a Harald. So that Harald at the bottom of my hand is the one that I am fetching every time I mutate my Harald on the battlefield. Well, actually, I mutate it once, but every time I cast a Harald, that's the one that comes from my library into my hand. So you can see the loop happening in action. I could win on this turn if we get to the loop timer. If I need to stop it, I will. But if I need to keep it going, I can also do that as well. Sure, we'll stop it this time. It's probably just quicker to go through another turn than keep the loop going. This guy's got a decimator, but it's not going to matter at this point. What I could also do is just turn off my Haralds and then make it so that I don't loop anymore, and then win. So there you go. There is the first battle. I'll show you some of the others. All right. Using Domri, I actually changed the deck a little bit. I took out some of the enchantments so that Blossom Prancer consistently pulls out the right pieces to get our deck going here. So we get Zendikar Resurgent, which will be good, but we want that Greathorn and Harald. So we'll do this, play a Whip Cracker and get rid of that Ariete, which would really mess things up for us. So play Harald first and then the Greathorn. We're going to save it in our hand because I don't see a way to cast them both on this turn. So we'll just try and power up our cards in hand And yeah, this should be it, because we'll get the Zendikar down and the Memorial, so that will give us haste and card draw. Oh shoot, they are playing something I did not want them to play. Gosh, that really messed up our strategy. They're playing Authority of the Consul, so we won't be able to do much if we don't get that out of there. So we'll have to play this Chaos Warp, or else we're in trouble. Okay, and now we will try and get another Great Horn out. Get to a second ability. This would be nice to get rid of them. But I think I'll play that Authority of the Consuls first. Doing everything they can to stop the loop from going. There's a Harald, but also Blossom Prancer. I would like the Blossom Prancer first. Maybe play the Rockfall Veil. Grab a Great Horn. Okay, here we go. Should be able to get it going this time. All right. We should be in business here. Let's take out their creatures. Got the Ariete. But we'll be able to take it out once we get our next creature down. Oh, I didn't even... Forgot I stole that. Okay, we can put the Harald back on the bottom of our deck. Just keep doing this. Eventually we'll get the pieces we want and just take everything else out. Let's mutate you. Why not? Take out their pieces here. Don't need a Blossom Prancer at this point. Put another Whip Cracker down. So there is that doing that. And then we wait our next turn. And then we win. I forgot that Akroma's Memorial doesn't trigger if you hit the loop timer, so that's something I will have to adjust. Maybe I'll put in an artifact that gives creatures haste on entering the battlefield. So I just wanted to share with you a battle in PvE, just to show you that it's viable there as well, of course. And we're going to try and get our loop going so that we can try and win this battle in less than whatever turns. That's kind of up to... We're kind of at the mercy of what we draw here as far as that goes. But maybe we can get to his first ability here soon and grab the pieces we need. Okay, there's our Harald. And we'll get our Great Horn going. Okay, yeah, I think we're ready here. Okay, we start our loop here. That's fine to kick. So we'll get that mana back. Inscription of Abundance. I'll throw it on that. Sure, we can kick. You just don't want to kick when your Harald is your next card, because it will then break the loop. No. See, there we go. That's when you wouldn't want to kick it. So we'll get veto down, and then we will start to chip away at their life with bigger chunks. Keep our loop going. This one is also a cool combo because it doesn't rely on combat damage as your only win con. You can win as you loop. This might take a while, but we'll get there if we draw more of our inscriptions of abundance. We just throw it on Harald every time, and we're going to be gaining massive amounts of life. So it's pretty safe in that way as a looper, because if you take a lot of damage trying to set it up, you get it back with all of your inscriptions of abundance that you will be drawing into. What you could also try instead of Inscription of Abundance is Verdant Sun's Avatar. It's a creature though, so it'll take up a creature slot. But that's the nice thing about mutation is it's a creature slot that actually kind of substitutes as a spell as well, almost like an enchantment. So you don't necessarily have to think of it as taking up a creature slot, because it's a creature that can slot into an existing creature. So we could have Veto, Harald, and Verdant Sun's Avatar down. And we're going to be gaining much more life that way. So that's probably a better card than Inscription of Abundance, because it will trigger every time you grab a new Harald. But Inscription of Abundance is fine if you don't have Verdant Sun's Avatar. 1 within 7 rounds, and we did not lose any creatures, so proof of concept confirmed. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed my comprehensive guide to making Harald loops. Huge shout out to Zivert, who I relied on heavily to make this video. He is one of the main proponents of this loop. He uses it all the time, and he happens to be one of the best, if not the best player in the game, and he knows his stuff. So thanks again to him, and thank you for watching. And I hope you get a lot out of this video. If this is a loop that you're already very familiar with, feel free to chime in with your own ideas, because I'm sure there are a lot. It's not one that I rely on a lot, I gotta be honest, but there are plenty of people who play it a lot, and so they probably have a lot more insight and info on it, and I hope they jump in the comments with them. So that'll do it for me. See you in the next video.